Welcome to the next episode in the 25-day story series by StorySteps. This is a complete story building series where we take a rough idea called Lost Boy and we turn it into a fully structured story suitable for a novel or a feature-length screenplay, step by step. Before we get started, there are two things you need to know. This video is part of a series and you're not watching the first episode. If you're just starting out and you want to get back to the beginning, click the link in the description. It'll take you to the playlist and you can start from session 1. Second, I'll be using StorySteps in this series. You don't have to. Every concept I teach in this series can be used with traditional means, pen and paper even. But if you want to follow along with StorySteps, you can sign up for free on storysteps.net. Every function that we cover in this series is part of the free functionality. If later on I decide I want to cover a premium function, I'll make sure in that episode you will get a coupon to use that function for free. Each session builds on the last, and by the end you'll see how a story grows from a simple premise to a complete structure with characters, conflict, theme, and all the nuts and bolts to hold it together. Now, let's jump into today's video. Should you start your story with a character or a premise? When writers sit down to write a new story, they tend to start in one out of two ways. Either you got a really great character you want to write about, or you got a what-if scenario or a premise. Both approaches work. But whichever one you choose, the rest of your story has to be built to attack your character's emotional wound. If you start with a premise, your job is to find the worst possible character to put through that situation. If you start with a character, your job as a writer is to find the worst possible story to force that character through. Because the story works best when the plot constantly presses on the hero's deepest emotional weakness. There's a reason this matters, because most stories don't fail because of a bad idea. They fail because the story and the character are not designed for each other. The wound creates a flaw or an emotional shield for your hero. Your story's job is to force the hero to lower that shield and confront that emotional flaw. Otherwise, your hero never grows and your story will have no tension. Now let's look at Lost Boy, the case study from our last video. Sam's wound is abandonment. His parents are gone, his uncle has dropped him off at an orphanage. Headmaster Ironhand uses his wound to teach him to mistrust. If Sam's wound is abandonment, then his victory must be belonging. Yet Sam has learned to mistrust anyone that's not his uncle, and he pushes everyone else away. That is his emotional shield and his flaw. Yet Sam is no superhero, and he can't bring down those pirates on his own. He's gonna need allies, forcing him to bring down that shield of mistrust. And that's where the story's premise and the character's wound collide. And that's what makes a story work. So here's how you apply this to your story. If you start with a premise, ask yourself, what kind of person would struggle with this situation the most? Not physically, emotionally. Who is the worst person to have to face this challenge? If you start with a character, ask yourself, what kind of story would force this character to face their deepest wound? If they fear trust, make them have to trust someone. If they fear responsibility, put them in a situation where other people depend on them. Your plot should constantly poke at your hero's deepest wound. Take the story you're working on right now. Ask yourself two questions. Is my hero the worst possible person to have to face this challenge? And is my story the worst possible thing that might happen to that hero? If not, you gotta go back and change something. Either you rewrite the backstory and match the wound to the premise, or you rewrite the premise and send them on a different adventure. When your story and your wound lock together, your entire story instantly get so much stronger. Now go write your story. You've just watched session 2 of the 25-day story series by StorySteps. At the end of this series, you're going to see this Lost Boy idea go from a simple idea to a complex story with all the nuts and bolts. The next time, we're going to have a look at how to create a villain that directly attacks your hero's wound. I'll see you then.